Hey guys, Alan from Solve Game's Guide here, and today I'm going to walk you through the McKinsey Solve assessment in the summer of 2026 and how best to prepare. I'm going to walk you through each of the 3 games included in the test, which are the Redrock Study, the Sea Wolf, and Sustainable Futures Lab, which was introduced in April 2026. I'll give you an overview of each game, tell you what candidates struggle with the most, and then give you the tips and strategies to perform the best. The ecosystem game is no longer part of the McKinsey assessment. It was phased out last year or a couple of years ago. So there's still some confusion online, but it is completely out of the assessment. The Redrock Study is a 35-minute math-based problem-solving test, and this is generally the test that candidates find the most challenging and are the most worried about going into the Solve assessment. But actually, the math is pretty basic, and if you just watch out for a few things, you can do quite well in it. So let me give you a breakdown of what the assessment actually includes. There are 4 parts to it. The investigation phase is the first, and followed by the analysis phase, and then the report phase, and finally the case phase. So in the investigation phase, you're just given the case study and some information. You can save that information on the dashboard that you're given. There is this thing called a journal where you can drag and drop the information that you see. Not all information will be draggable, but there will be some. And I advise you to just drag and drop all the information you can and make sure the journal is organized, because that can potentially affect your score in the background. I've seen some debate online about whether you should drag and drop everything that you see or only the relevant information. Quite frankly, all the information that I saw in the investigation phase and all of the assessments were relevant, and so you should just drag them and drop them. And even if not, it's not that serious. It's not going to make or break your assessment. So don't lose track and focus on all these minor details that aren't really that important. So once you read the investigation phase, you move on to the analysis phase. This is where you will answer 3 questions. Each question has a subset of questions, A, B, C, etc. And this will be based on the investigation phase that you just read. And during this time, you can go back and forth between the 2 phases. You'll have an on-screen calculator. I highly suggest you use it because they gave it to you for a reason. It could impact your process score. So there's this idea of a process score, which is apart from the answers, McKinsey are also testing how you interact with their user interface. Okay, so there's a big question I get a lot is, well, can I use my own calculator? The answer is best to use the calculator they gave you because it might impact your score. We don't know, but I'm sure McKinsey know that you can afford a calculator. Just use the on-screen calculator. I know it's kind of less convenient and less quick, but just use it. Once you finish the analysis phase, you finish answering the 3 questions, you move on to the report phase. At this point, you cannot go back to the analysis or the investigation phase. Your answers are locked in, so do sense check them before moving on. In the report phase, there are 2 parts. There's the written report. This is where you'll have kind of a report to fill out. It's mostly just like fill in the blanks, selecting answers from a drop down. You will have your journal still with you and also the on-screen calculator, so you can still drop answers from your journal where you previously saved information. When you save information in the analysis phase, when you submit your answers in the analysis phase, it's also automatically saved into the journal. So you don't have to worry about remembering every detail. It's going to be there. Just make sure it's labeled correctly so you don't get confused. So once you fill in the written report, you move on to the visual report. This is where you will construct a type of table, and you'll have to choose whether you want it to be a pie chart, a bar chart, or a line chart. Obviously, pick the most appropriate one. It varies a bit by assessment. Pick the most appropriate table, and then you'll have to fill in certain numbers, all of which you've already calculated from the analysis phase or you've saved from the investigation phase. Once you're done with that, you move on to the case phase. This is 6 questions. They're completely independent of each other and of all the questions that came before them. Again, you cannot at this point go back to any of the phases. The report phase, you've already locked in your answers. You can't change them. And in the case phase, this is a completely new phase. Each of the questions are independent. These questions will typically be like about information from a graph, or nearly all of them have exhibits or histograms or tables, and you'll just be kind of answering the questions that they give you on that. Like I said, Redrock is not actually difficult. The math is not challenging, but the biggest challenge of the test is that the questions are very ambiguous. You're asked questions in a very weird way that doesn't make it immediately obvious what the question is asking from you. And you're going to spend a lot of time rereading information and trying to just understand what does the question say, what does the data say. So it's more about the wording and confusion than any difficult math. The math is basic, but arithmetics, percentages, multiplication, division. So I wouldn't worry about that. The best way to tackle this is to go to solvegamesguide.com and do the free simulator, and you'll see exactly what I mean. The questions are not very clear cut, but once you go through the simulator, you'll build some familiarity with what the test will be like. The question ambiguity is not that challenging anymore. The second thing that's challenging about the Redrock study is that you're given a lot of information, and most of it is completely useless. This is especially true in the case phase. There are all of these charts and tables, and you can actually disregard most of it. But when you're going through the assessment for the first time and you're not sure and the questions are not clear and you're given all this information and you're thinking to yourself, well, I must, there must be some point of this information. It's not just there to confuse me, right? But in most cases, actually, it is there to confuse you. And the questions are very simple. So again, this is just about like familiarity. If you go into the test never having practiced, it's going to be difficult. It's going to feel like you're under a lot of time pressure because you're trying to decipher everything in the moment. But the test is actually quite simple. Redrock is simple. Don't worry about it. Again, the best advice is just do a practice run completely free at solvegamesguide.com. The Seawolf is a 30-minute logic optimization game that candidates typically find easier to do than the Redrock Study. The game sounds a bit complicated, but once you've gone through it and understand it, it's actually quite simple. In this game, you play as a microbiologist and you're sent to these 3 different sites at sea, and you have to clean them up by creating a treatment. And these treatments are made up of microbes. Each site has 3 attributes. These attributes have numerical target ranges from between 1 to 10 and are in intervals of 2. There is also a desired trait and an undesired trait. Your task will be to create a treatment for this site using a combination of 3 microbes. Each microbe has a number for each of the attributes and a single trait. Once all 3 microbes are selected, your final treatment is calculated by averaging out the attributes and also checking if you have the desired and undesired traits present in any of the 3 microbes. For each of the attributes in range, you earn 20 percentage points, and for the desired trait being present in at least 1 microbe, you earn another 20%, and if the undesired trait is absent from all microbes, you earn another 20% for a maximum of 100%, but it may not always be possible to get a full score. Moving on to the actual gameplay, there are 4 phases in the Seawolf game. The first phase is the profiling phase, and it should be the easiest and quickest to get through. The idea in this phase is that you profile for the attributes or traits that you would like to see most commonly occur in the microbes later in the game. This doesn't actually affect what microbes you'll see later in the game. It's just for McKinsey to test your logic optimization. So it makes sense to try and profile for the rarest targets in a microbe. This means profiling the attribute that is the greatest outlier or furthest from the middle, and also selecting the desired trait. So for this site, for example, we can see that energy is the biggest outlier, So we would select energy and set it to the site's target. And we would also select the desired trait, which is aerobic. And then we would continue on to the next phase. The second phase is the categorization phase, and as with the first, it does not actually affect later on gameplay or your final treatment. It is just for McKinsey to test your optimization logic. In this phase, you will have to categorize roughly 10 microbes into the current site, the next site, or to return the microbes. You will also be given one piece of information on the next site, which could be a trait or an attribute. The rules we use for Solve Games Guide at this phase is that if a microbe has at least 2 targets for the current site, which could be an attribute and a trait, or 2 attributes, then it goes to the current site unless it has the undesired trait. If it has the undesired trait, it never goes into site 1. If it doesn't have 2 targets for the current site, but it does have a target for the next site, then it goes into the next site, even if it has the undesired trait of the current site. If it does not meet any targets for the current site or the next site, or if it does meet the current site's target but it does have the undesired trait, then it goes into the return. The next phase is the prospecting phase, and this is arguably the most important step of the game where you will be spending the most time on. You will be given a preloaded pool of 6 microbes, and in this round you will have to choose 4 microbes until you have a total of 10 microbes in your pool. In the next phase after this, you will use that pool of 10 microbes to select a combination of 3 microbes for your final treatment option. So this is a very important step. To choose the 4 microbes that you will add to the pool, you will be given a choice of 3 microbes, and you will add 1 to the pool and discard the remaining 2, and you do this 4 times. The smartest strategy here is to look at your preloaded pool and do some rough calculations to see which microbes you would need to meet all of the site's targets. You then look at the choice of microbes that you are given and select the most appropriate one that will help you get closest to your target. This will mean that sometimes you have to choose a microbe that doesn't itself hit any of the targets or even have the desired trait, but it will help average out a potential final treatment option to reach the most targets. One rule to bear in mind here is that you should never select microbes that have the undesired trait, even if their attributes will help balance out overall averages to meet other targets. You should still not select microbes with the undesired trait. Premium users at solvegamesguide.com will be able to switch on a calculator that will tell them which microbe can increase the max treatment score that exists in the pool and how much it will increase their final treatment score by. In the last step, you will have to select the 3 microbes that you will submit for your final treatment. Remember that your final treatment is calculated by averaging the attributes of the 3 microbes and also seeing whether the desired and undesired trait are present. You get 20% for each target for a maximum of 100%, but that's not always possible. Premium users at solvegamesguide.com are able to use a calculator to see which microbes offer the best score and what percent. In this example, you can see that the maximum score for microbes is 80%, and there are cases in the real assessment where you will only be able to achieve an 80% score. Though candidates typically find that Seawolf is easier than Redrock, they also tend to perform better at it. So that means for you that is competing against other candidates applying to McKinsey, you need to be very careful not to slip up. And there are a couple of silly mistakes you can make that can make it easy for you to fall behind. The first one is because you're under time pressure and you're moving quick, is you can forget which site you're optimizing for. So for example, you might be on site 2, but in your head, you still might be remembering the target ranges from site 1, which is completely separate. And then if you start picking microbes based on that, then you can make a mistake. And one of the challenges of the Seawolf is that once you lock in an answer, once you submit an answer, you choose a microbe, for example, at any of the stages, you can no longer undo that choice. You can quickly make a lot of mistakes and completely mess up one of your site's scores. The second thing candidates might find challenging is actually knowing what rules to follow when optimizing for microbe selection. I've looked at information online and other people talk about this, and there's a lot of inconsistency, and it seems like people just following things arbitrarily without any structured game plan. And if you do this in the assessment, you're going to struggle. So I'm going to add a link where you can go and read the rules that we've follow at solvegamesguide.com. And obviously, we don't exactly know how McKinsey, score the test. However, we regularly have people who score in the 10th decile following our system. Sustainable Futures Lab is a consulting-style situational judgment test. It takes 20 minutes and has 13 questions. The first question is a ranking question where you will rank your priorities according to a brief you're given at the beginning of the assessment. And then the next 12 questions will be multiple choice. Candidates typically find this the easiest of the tests. They find that it's intuitive, and also they're not as rushed with the time pressure. So there is no math involved, it's purely situational judgment. So the part that people might find challenging with Sustainable Futures Lab is understanding how to make trade-offs, especially if you're maybe in university still or don't have much work experience. Making those trade-offs can seem a bit tricky. I think if you do have management consulting experience, then it might come more intuitively. So in the test, you'll be asked questions like, do you conserve resources now and sacrifice some deliverables that the client wants at this moment to conserve your resources for later down the line where you might need them? Or do you use all your resources now and risk not having them later on in the client's project, right? Those are kind of questions they'll ask you. That can seem tricky if you don't really have real-world experience. So a strategy that I find good for dealing with this is I tell people, think about these questions through the consultancy's lens. So think about the business side of the consultancy. Ultimately, you're a consultant, you're working for a company, and that company's priorities is making money. So anything you do to harm a reputation or standing or future business is obviously a no-no. You want to pick the option that kind of maximizes what's best for the consultancy. So for example, if you're given a scenario where a client has asked you to do some work and your team do the work and they worked really hard and they're really proud of the work, and the client comes back later and kind of maybe changes their mind about the work or says, well, that's not what I asked for. And you're given a question of, well, what do you do in this situation? Do you support your team and insist that actually the client, did ask for this and now they're going beyond scope? Or do you side with the client and say, yeah, sure, we're going to deliver it? And I think anybody who's worked in a real life consultancy knows the client is king. You always do what the client says. So that's a good way to think about these questions, is through the business lens of the consultancy itself. An extra tip I'll give you is that if you're running out of time, the answers are broken down into kind of two parts. One is the response that you give them, and the second part is like a role play part where there's some text. If you're running out of time, just skip the role play part. Don't read that part. Just read the options that are given to you and select based on those. It's the same thing. You're not going to be missing out on anything. So that's all there is to it, guys. We've gone through everything that the McKinsey Solve involves. I've told you about the challenges and the strategies you should use. And don't overthink this. Don't overcomplicate it. Just do some practice and stay calm during the assessment and you'll do fine. Check out solvegamesguide.com where we have free simulators for all the games. It's, in my biased opinion, the best free resource there is available. We also do have paid content for those who want to be absolutely sure that they completely smash their assessment with extra practice. Use code SGG10 for 10% off your first order. If you do have any questions, leave it in the comments below and I'll try to get to them. I'll also add a link to a page with the most common questions and answers about the Solve games. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you found this useful and good luck with your assessment.